On Thanksgiving morning, my daughter-in-law Rebecca stood in my kitchen doorway with her arms crossed and said, "Margaret, I need you to pack your things and be out by Sunday. This house is worth $847,000, and Daniel and I have already spoken to a realtor." I'm Margaret Rose Harrison, 72 years old, and I've lived in this house for 43 years. I was pulling my pecan pie from the oven when she said it, the same pie I'd made every Thanksgiving since 1981. The same kitchen where I'd raised my son Daniel, where my husband Thomas had kissed me goodbye every morning for 4 decades before the cancer took him 14 months ago. I set the pie on the cooling rack, turned to look at Rebecca's perfectly made-up face, her designer coat that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, and I said the only thing that came to mind. "Okay." Just that. "Okay." Rebecca blinked. I think she expected tears, maybe begging, possibly some dramatic elderly woman collapse that would make her feel powerful. Instead, I wiped my hands on my apron, the blue one with the faded sunflowers that Thomas gave me in 1987, and nodded. "I'll start packing tomorrow," I continued calmly. "The pie will be ready in about 20 minutes if you'd like to try it before the guests arrive." She stared at me like I'd spoken in another language. Then she recovered, smoothed her already smooth blonde hair, and said, "Daniel and I don't eat refined sugar anymore. And honestly, Margaret, you should consider your health at your age. Assisted living facilities have excellent dietary programs." Assisted living. I was 72, not 92. I walked 3 miles every morning. I volunteered at the library twice a week. I had a book club, a garden that won neighborhood awards, and I just learned how to use something called a podcast last month. But I didn't say any of that. I just smiled and said, "I'll look into it. If you're listening from somewhere far away, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this has traveled. And please, stay with me until the end." Because what Rebecca didn't know, what nobody knew, was about to change everything. The guests started arriving at 2 o'clock. My dining room table was set for 17 people. I'd spent 2 days cooking: turkey with herb butter, cornbread stuffing with sage from my garden, green bean casserole, mashed potatoes with real cream, cranberry sauce from scratch, sweet potato pie, and that pecan pie Rebecca had dismissed. Daniel arrived first with Rebecca and their daughter Emma, who was 6 years old and wearing a velvet dress that looked like it cost more than my winter heating bill. My granddaughter used to run to me when she saw me. Today, Rebecca held her hand firmly and steered her toward the living room. "Say hello to Grandma Margaret, Emma," Rebecca instructed in that voice she used when she wanted to appear polite in front of others. "Hello, Grandma Margaret," Emma parroted, then looked up at her mother for approval. My heart squeezed. When had my granddaughter started treating me like a stranger? My sister Patricia arrived next with her husband George. Then Daniel's cousins from his father's side. The Harrisons were a big family. My neighbors from across the street, the Caldwells, who'd been coming to our Thanksgiving for 15 years. Thomas's brother Richard and his wife Susan. 17 people filling my home with noise and laughter and the smell of good food. 17 people who had no idea that Rebecca had just told me I was being evicted from my own house. I moved through the afternoon like I was watching myself from above, serving food, refilling drinks, asking about jobs and grandchildren and vacation plans. Patricia kept giving me concerned looks. My sister always could read me, but I smiled and dodged her questions. Rebecca, I noticed, had positioned herself at the head of the table. My seat, the seat I'd occupied every Thanksgiving since Thomas and I moved into this house in 1981, the same year Daniel was born. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater and pants that probably came from some boutique where the salespeople bring you champagne while you shop. Her diamond earrings caught the light every time she moved her head. She looked expensive, polished, perfect. She looked like she already owned the place. "Margaret," she called out as I was setting the cranberry sauce on the table. "Daniel and I have an announcement." The room quieted. Forks paused mid-air. Daniel looked uncomfortable. He was my son, my only child, and I could still read every expression on his face, even though he was 43 years old now. He looked like he wanted to be anywhere but here. "As most of you know," Rebecca continued, her voice carrying that practiced smoothness of someone who'd rehearsed this moment. "Thomas passed away last year. It's been incredibly difficult for all of us, especially for Margaret." She said my name like she was talking about a tragic figure in a play. "Margaret has been so strong," Rebecca went on. But Daniel and I have been concerned about her living alone in this big house. It's too much for someone her age. The maintenance, the yard work, the stairs. I watched people nod sympathetically. The Caldwells exchanged glances. Thomas's brother Richard frowned into his wine glass. So, Rebecca said, reaching over to squeeze Daniel's hand, we've made the decision to help Margaret transition into a more appropriate living situation. We've been looking at some wonderful assisted living communities that specialize in— Rebecca, Patricia's voice cut through the room like a knife. What exactly are you saying? Rebecca's smile didn't waver. We're saying that Daniel and I are going to take over the house. We've already spoken to a realtor about the property value. It's worth $847,000 in the current market, and we think it's the perfect size for our growing family. Emma needs more space, and we're hoping to give her a sibling soon. The silence that followed was arctic. Take over, Patricia repeated slowly. You mean buy? Well, Rebecca laughed lightly, it's a family house. We're keeping it in the family, and of course we'll help Margaret find a nice place. There's a facility in— Does Margaret want to move? This was Susan, Thomas's sister-in-law, who'd always been blunt to the point of rudeness, and whom I'd always secretly loved for it. Rebecca's smile finally slipped. It's not about want, Susan. It's about what's realistic. Margaret can't maintain a house like this on her own. I'm sitting right here, I said quietly. Everyone turned to look at me. I was standing by the kitchen doorway with a serving spoon still in my hand, and I realized this was the first time I'd spoken since Rebecca's announcement began. I'm sitting right here, I repeated, and I can speak for myself. Rebecca's face flushed. Of course, Margaret. I'm just trying to help. You know you can't afford this house on your own. There it was, the assumption that had been building for 14 months, ever since Thomas died. The assumption that I was helpless, that I'd never worked, that I had no money of my own, that I was just an old woman waiting to be managed by her more capable daughter-in-law. You're probably right, I said, and watched Rebecca's face brighten with victory. This house is a lot of work. Exactly, Rebecca beamed. See? Margaret understands. She's being so reasonable about this. I turned to walk back into the kitchen, then paused and looked over my shoulder. I'll need a few weeks to arrange things, though. There's quite a bit to handle, paperwork and such. Of course, Rebecca said graciously. We're not monsters. Take until Christmas. That gives you almost a month. Christmas. She was giving me until Christmas to pack up 43 years of my life. I went back into the kitchen and started cutting the pecan pie. My hands were steady. My mind was very, very clear. Behind me, conversation slowly resumed. Someone tried to change the subject to football. The Caldwells made their excuses and left early. They'd been Thomas's friends first, and their faces had been full of disgust at Rebecca's announcement. I brought out the pie. Rebecca, despite her comment about refined sugar, ate 2 pieces. By 6 o'clock, everyone had gone home except Patricia, who'd sent George ahead and stayed behind to help me clean up. Maggie, she said. She was the only person who still called me that. What the hell was that? I was washing dishes at the sink, watching the soap bubbles catch the light from the window over the yard. In the fading afternoon sun, I could see my garden, the rose bushes Thomas had planted for our 20th anniversary, the vegetable patch I'd expanded every year, the old oak tree where we'd hung a swing for Daniel when he was 3. That was Rebecca showing her hand, I said. And you just said okay? Patricia's voice was climbing. Maggie, she can't just take your house. Can't she? I turned to look at my sister. She was 75, 3 years older than me, and her face was red with anger on my behalf. I'm a widow. Daniel's my only heir. The house is worth almost $1 million. Why wouldn't she think she can take it? Because you're alive, Patricia threw the dish towel down on the counter. Because it's your house. Because you raised her ungrateful husband, and this is— She stopped, breathing hard. Maggie, what are you going to do? I dried my hands carefully on my apron and folded it over the counter. I'm going to pack, I said. You're giving up? Just like that? I didn't say that. Patricia stared at me. Then slowly, very slowly, she smiled. You have a plan. I didn't say that either. But you do. Oh my God, Maggie, you have that look. You had that same look when Thomas's first wife tried to get custody of Daniel back in '85. You had that look when the city tried to rezone the neighborhood in '93. What are you planning? Patricia, I took her hands in mine. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? My sister looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. What do you need? I need you to not ask questions for 2 weeks. Can you do that? 2 weeks? Maybe 3. And then? And then, I said, we'll have another family dinner. Patricia kissed my cheek and left. I locked the door behind her and walked through my house in the gathering darkness. I didn't turn on any lights. I walked through rooms I'd walked through thousands of times. The living room where Daniel had taken his first steps, the hallway where we'd marked his height every birthday until he turned 18, the master bedroom where Thomas had died peacefully in his sleep 14 months ago with my hand in his. Rebecca thought this was just a house worth $847,000. She had no idea. I went into Thomas's study, I still thought of it as his study even though he was gone, and sat at his desk. The room smelled faintly of his cologne, though that was probably my imagination. I hadn't changed anything in here since he died. His books were still on the shelves. His reading glasses were still on the desk next to his favorite fountain pen. I opened the bottom drawer. Inside was a locked metal box. I'd always known it was there. Thomas had shown it to me on our wedding night in 1979 and said, "If anything ever happens to me, everything you need is in here. Don't open it unless you have to." I'd never asked what was inside. Thomas was an accountant, or he'd been before he retired, and I'd trusted him with everything. Our finances, our savings, our future. Now he was gone, and Rebecca thought I was just a helpless old woman who'd never worked a day in her life. I took the small key from the chain around my neck. I'd worn it every day since Thomas died, and opened the box. Inside were documents. So many documents. Bank statements, property deeds, stock certificates, insurance policies, all organized in Thomas's neat handwriting with dates and account numbers and notes in the margins. And on top, a letter in an envelope with my name on it in his handwriting. For Margaret Rose, my brilliant wife. My hands trembled as I opened it. My dearest Maggie, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I'm so sorry I can't be there to help you navigate what comes next. But I tried to make it as simple as possible. You know I was always the practical one, and you were always the kind one. You let people underestimate you because you never needed them to know how smart you are. But now I need you to be practical too. Everything is in your name. The house, the accounts, the investments, all of it. Daniel is named in my will, but only after you. Rebecca doesn't know this. I didn't trust her even back when I was healthy, and I trust her less now that I'm writing this from a hospital bed. The property deed to our house at 847 Maple Street is in Section A. You'll see it's paid in full and has been since 1998. In Section B, you'll find the documentation for the other properties. Yes, properties, plural. I never told you because I didn't want you to worry, but I invested well. In Section C, there are the account numbers for our various investments and savings. The total is substantial, my love. You'll never need to worry about money. I've also included a document from my lawyer, James Mitchell. You met him at our 40th anniversary party. His number is at the bottom. He knows everything and will help you if you need legal support. Rebecca will try to take everything. I know this because I saw how she looked at our house, how she calculated things, how she talked about family assets like she'd already inherited them. Don't let her. You are stronger than she will ever be. I love you. I've loved you since 1979 when you walked into my office with that tax question, and I pretended I needed 3 appointments to answer it just so I could keep seeing you. Take care of our Daniel. He's weak when it comes to her, but he's still our son. And take care of yourself. Forever yours, Thomas. I sat at his desk with tears running down my face, reading his words over and over. Even dead, even gone, Thomas was still taking care of me. I wiped my eyes and pulled out the first document from Section A, Property Deed, 847 Maple Street, Riverside. Owners, Thomas Harrison and Margaret Rose Harrison. Paid in full, December 1998. I pulled out the next document from Section B, Property Deed, 1243 Oak Avenue, Riverside. Owner, Margaret Rose Harrison. Rental property, purchased March 2003. Another document. Property Deed, 567 Pine Street, Riverside. Owner, Margaret Rose Harrison. Rental property, purchased July 2006. Another. By the time I finished reading through Section B, I was staring at documents for 17 properties. 17, all in my name, all purchased over this past 20 years with Thomas's careful investments, all generating rental income that had been automatically deposited into accounts I'd never looked at because Thomas handled the finances. I moved to Section C with hands that were no longer trembling. Bank statement, Riverside First National Bank. Account holder, Margaret Rose Harrison. Current balance, $847,392.18. Investment portfolio, Hartford Securities. Account holder, Margaret Rose Harrison. Current value, $2,347,891.45. Stock certificates, various companies. Owner, Margaret Rose Harrison. Estimated value, $1,103,847. I kept reading, adding, calculating in my head the way Thomas had taught me to do when we first married, and I'd been embarrassed that I wasn't good with numbers. By the time I reached the last page, the total was clear. My net worth, my personal net worth, not including the house Rebecca thought she was taking, was approximately $12.7 million. $12,700,000. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. I sat in my dead husband's study in the dark and laughed until my sides hurt. Rebecca had called me an old woman who couldn't afford to keep her house. She'd announced in front of 17 people that she was taking my $847,000 home because I was too poor and helpless to maintain it. She had no idea I owned 17 other properties worth more than that combined. She had no idea I had nearly $13 million in assets. She had no idea that Thomas had protected me from exactly this scenario. I gathered up the documents carefully and put them back in the box. Then I picked up my phone and dialed the number at the bottom of Thomas's letter. A man answered on the third ring. Mitchell and Associates, James Mitchell speaking. Mr. Mitchell, I said, my voice steady now. My name is Margaret Rose Harrison. I believe my late husband Thomas told you I might call. There was a brief pause. Mrs. Harrison, I've been expecting your call. I'm very sorry for your loss. Thomas was a good friend. Thank you. Mr. Mitchell, I need legal advice. Of course, what's the situation? I took a breath. My daughter-in-law has just informed me that she's taking my house. She announced it to my entire family at Thanksgiving dinner today. She thinks I can't afford to keep it, and she's given me until Christmas to move out. Another pause. I see. And does she know about Thomas's estate plan? No. Does she know about the properties? No. Does she know about the accounts? No. I heard him exhale. Mrs. Harrison, I think we need to meet in person. Are you available Monday morning? Yes. Good. Come to my office at 9 a.m. Bring all the documents from Thomas's lockbox. We're going to make sure your daughter-in-law understands exactly what kind of mistake she's made. Mr. Mitchell, I said, I don't want revenge. I just want justice. Mrs. Harrison, he replied. Sometimes they're the same thing. I hung up and sat in the darkness of Thomas's study for a long time. Outside, the streetlights had come on. I could see my reflection in the window. An old woman with gray hair and gentle eyes, wearing an apron with faded sunflowers. Rebecca saw that old woman and thought she was weak. She had no idea what was coming. I stood up and walked out of the study, closing the door carefully behind me. The house was quiet now. My house. The house Thomas and I had built our life in. The house where I'd raised my son, buried my husband, made 43 years of memories. Rebecca thought she could take it with an announcement over Thanksgiving dinner. She thought wrong. I went upstairs to start packing, but not for the reason Rebecca thought. I was packing Thomas's documents, organizing them, preparing them for Monday's meeting with James Mitchell. And I was smiling. Monday morning arrived cold and gray. I woke at 5:30 like I always did, made my coffee, and sat at the kitchen table watching the sky lighten over my garden. I'd spent the weekend going through every document in Thomas's lockbox. I'd made lists, taken notes, organized everything into folders labeled with dates and account numbers. Patricia had called 6 times. I'd let it go to voicemail every time. This was something I needed to do alone. At 8:15, I put on my best navy blue dress, the one I'd worn to Thomas's funeral, and my pearl earrings. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw what Rebecca saw. A 72-year-old woman in conservative clothes and sensible shoes. Good. Let her keep thinking that. James Mitchell's office was downtown in a building I'd passed hundreds of times but never entered. The lobby was all marble and glass, the kind of place that smelled like money and power. A directory by the elevator listed Mitchell and Associates on the 12th floor. The receptionist was a young woman with a Bluetooth headset and impossibly white teeth. "Mrs. Harrison? Mr. Mitchell is expecting you. Conference room 2, right this way." She led me down a hallway lined with mahogany doors and legal certificates in expensive frames. Conference room 2 had windows overlooking the entire downtown, a table that could seat 20 people, and James Mitchell standing by the window in a charcoal suit. He was about 60, with silver hair and the kind of calm, intelligent face that made you want to trust him immediately. "Mrs. Harrison." He shook my hand firmly. "Thank you for coming. Can I get you coffee? Water?" "Coffee would be lovely. Black, please." He poured from a carafe on the side table, and we sat across from each other. I put my folder on the table between us. "Thomas talked about you often," James said. "He was very proud of you." "Did he tell you what he was planning? The properties, the investments?" "Every detail. He came to see me about 3 months before he died. He said he needed to make sure you were protected, that he didn't trust Rebecca, and wanted everything legally airtight." James opened his own folder. "He was very specific about how the estate should be structured. I never knew about any of it. The properties, the money, I had no idea. He wanted you to have peace while he was alive. He didn't want you worrying about investments and rental properties and stock portfolios, but he also knew that eventually you'd need to know everything." James pulled out a document. "This is Thomas's will. Have you seen it?" "No. It's very straightforward. The house at 847 Maple Street goes to you for your lifetime. You have the right to live there until you die or choose to sell it. Only after your death does Daniel inherit, and even then, there are conditions." "What conditions?" "Daniel can only inherit if he's not married to Rebecca at the time of your passing. If he is, the house goes into a trust for his children only. Rebecca can never touch it." I stared at him. "Thomas knew?" "Thomas knew exactly what kind of woman she was. He told me once that she looked at your house the way a shark looks at blood in the water." James slid another document across. "And this is the deed to 847 Maple Street. You'll see both your names as joint owners, and with Thomas's passing, you became the sole owner. It's paid in full. Rebecca has absolutely no legal claim to it." "She doesn't know that." "Clearly not, or she wouldn't have been foolish enough to announce a takeover at Thanksgiving dinner." James leaned back. "Tell me exactly what happened." I told him everything. Rebecca's announcement, her words about assisted living, the $847,000 figure she'd thrown around like she'd already hired an appraiser, Daniel's silence, the deadline of Christmas to move out. James took notes on a legal pad, his face growing darker with each detail. "Elder financial abuse," he said when I finished. "That's what this is called. It's illegal in this state, and it carries both civil and criminal penalties. I don't want to send my son to jail. Your son didn't do this. His wife did, and we need to make sure she understands the consequences." He pulled out more documents. "Now let's talk about the rest of your assets. Have you reviewed everything Thomas left you?" We spent the next hour going through it all. James had complete records. Thomas had kept him updated on every property purchase, every investment, every account. "The rental properties generate approximately $47,000 per month in income," James explained. "That's $564,000 per year. The investment portfolio has grown by an average of 8% annually. Your total liquid assets, meaning money you can access immediately, are approximately $4.2 million. Your total net worth, including properties and investments, is $12,847,392 as of last Friday's market close. $12,847,392. And Rebecca thinks I'm a penniless old woman who can't afford her heating bill," I said quietly. "Yes, she does, which gives us a considerable strategic advantage." James pulled out a fresh legal pad. "Here's what I propose. We let her continue thinking she's won. We let her make plans, contact realtors, maybe even start packing your things. The more she does, the more evidence we gather of her intentions." "You want me to let her think she's taking my house?" "For now. Meanwhile, we document everything. Every conversation, every demand, every threat. We build an airtight case. And then, at the right moment, we confront her with the truth, legally, publicly, and completely." "When?" James smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "I'm thinking Christmas dinner. She gave you until Christmas to move out. Let's give her a Christmas surprise she'll never forget. I went home from James's office with a plan and a small digital recorder he'd given me. Record every conversation with Rebecca or Daniel, he'd instructed. Even phone calls. This state allows one-party consent recording. It's completely legal. That afternoon, Rebecca called. Margaret, I hope you've started packing. Daniel and I drove by the house this morning and the leaves need to be raked. You really should maintain the property better. It affects the resale value. I turned on the recorder. I've started sorting through things, yes. Good. I've made an appointment with a moving company for December 15th. That gives you 2 weeks to be completely out. They'll take your things directly to whatever facility you choose. That's very efficient of you, Rebecca. Well, someone has to be organized. Daniel is too soft-hearted about this whole thing. He actually suggested we let you stay until spring, can you imagine? But I told him we need to think about Emma's future. This house should have been ours years ago, really. Thomas held on to it far too long. My hand tightened on the phone. Is that what you think? It's not what I think, Margaret. It's just reality. You never worked. You never contributed financially to anything. You were just a housewife. And now that Thomas is gone, you need to be realistic about your situation. The house is the only asset you have, and Daniel deserves his inheritance. I see. I'm glad you're being reasonable about this. Some mothers-in-law would make this so much harder. She paused. Oh, and Margaret? When you're packing, don't take any of the furniture. The house will sell better staged, and frankly, that old furniture won't fit in an assisted living apartment anyway. We'll donate it and take the tax deduction. She hung up before I could respond. I sat there with the recorder still running, my hands shaking with rage. Don't take any of the furniture. The furniture Thomas and I had bought together, piece by piece, over 43 years. The dining table where we'd hosted hundreds of dinners. The rocking chair where I'd nursed Daniel as a baby. The grandfather clock Thomas's parents had given us as a wedding present. I played the recording back, listening to Rebecca's voice, dismissing my entire life as worthless. Then I called James Mitchell and emailed him the audio file. He called me back within an hour. Margaret, this is perfect. She's establishing clear intent to deprive you of your property and assets. Keep recording everything. The next day I went to my bank. The manager, Mr. Peterson, had known Thomas and me for 30 years. He looked surprised when I asked to see statements for all accounts under my name. Mrs. Harrison, are you sure? There are quite a few accounts and I'm sure. He printed everything. It took 45 minutes and filled a folder 3 inches thick. I sat in my car in this bank parking lot and went through them page by page. Checking account at Riverside First National, $87,392.18. Savings account at Riverside First National, $760,000. Money market account at Riverside First National, $1,200,000. Investment account at Hartford Securities, $2,347,891.45. Retirement account at Hartford Securities, $1,847,293. I kept finding accounts I didn't know existed. Each one had my name, Margaret Rose Harrison, as the sole owner. Each one had been carefully managed by Thomas, growing steadily over decades. In the middle of the stack, I found something else. Automatic deposits of $47,000 coming in every month from something called Harrison Property Management, LLC, the rental income James had mentioned. I drove to the address listed for Harrison Property Management. It was a small office in a strip mall, squeezed between a dry cleaner and a tax preparation service. The sign on the door said HPM, Property Management Services. Inside, a woman about 50 was working at a desk covered in files. She looked up when I entered. Can I help you? I'm Margaret Harrison. I believe my late husband Thomas owned this company. Her face changed immediately. Mrs. Harrison! Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry for your loss. Mr. Harrison was wonderful to work for. I'm Linda Chen, the property manager. She came around the desk to shake my hand. I've been sending the monthly reports to the accountant like Mr. Harrison instructed, but I wasn't sure if anyone was reading them. Are you here to sell the properties? No, I'm here to understand what I own. Linda's face brightened. Oh, good. Mr. Harrison built such a solid portfolio. Please sit down. Let me show you everything. She pulled out a large binder with tabs for each property. 17 tabs. These are your properties, Mrs. Harrison. Mr. Harrison purchased them over about 20 years, always in good neighborhoods, always with strong rental potential. We currently have them all rented, and maintenance costs are minimal because he always insisted on quality repairs. She opened to the first tab. 1243 Oak Avenue, 3-bedroom house, rented to a young family, $2,800 per month. They've been there 4 years, excellent tenants. Second tab. 567 Pine Street, 2-bedroom bungalow, rented to a retired couple, $2,200 per month. She went through all 17 properties. Every single one was rented, generating income, professionally managed. The total monthly rental income is $47,300, Linda said. After property taxes, insurance, and maintenance costs, your net monthly income is approximately $43,000. That's $516,000 per year in passive income. $516,000 per year. And Rebecca thought I couldn't afford to keep my house. Mrs. Harrison? Linda was looking at me with concern. Are you all right? I'm fine. I'm just learning a lot today. I took a breath. Linda, I need copies of everything. Every rental agreement, every maintenance record, every financial statement. Can you do that for me? Of course. Mr. Harrison set everything up to be completely transparent. You're the owner. You have the right to see everything. She started pulling files. Should I continue sending the monthly reports to the accountant, or would you like them sent directly to you? Send them to both the accountant and to me. And Linda, please don't mention to anyone that I came here today. She looked curious, but nodded. Of course, Mrs. Harrison. Your business is your business. I left with 2 shopping bags full of documents and a much clearer picture of what Thomas had built for me. Patricia finally cornered me at the grocery store on Wednesday. Maggie, you're avoiding me. I'm not avoiding you. I'm busy. Busy packing to give your house to that barracuda? Patricia grabbed my shopping cart to stop me from pushing past. Talk to me. What's going on? I looked at my sister's worried face and made a decision. Get in the car. We need to talk somewhere private. We drove to the park where Thomas and I used to take Daniel when he was little. The playground equipment was different now, but the oak trees were the same. We sat at a picnic table while I told Patricia everything. The lockbox, the letter from Thomas, the properties, the money, James Mitchell, the plan. Patricia's mouth hung open further with each revelation. When I finished, she just stared at me. $12 million, she finally said. $12,847,392 as of last Friday. And Rebecca thinks I'm a penniless old woman who never worked and can't afford my heating bill. Patricia started laughing. She laughed so hard she had to put her head down on the picnic table. Oh my God, Maggie. That woman has no idea what's coming. I need you to keep this secret until Christmas. Can you do that? Can I come to Christmas dinner? Please? I need to see her face when she finds out. You're invited. Front row seat. Patricia wiped her eyes. What does Daniel know? That was the question that had been keeping me awake at night. I don't know. I don't know if he's part of this or if Rebecca is manipulating him too. He's your son. He's her husband, and he hasn't called me once since Thanksgiving to ask if I'm okay. That weekend, Rebecca came to the house unannounced. I was in the garden when I heard the front door open. She'd apparently gotten Daniel's key. I came inside to find her in the living room with a tape measure and a notebook. Rebecca, I didn't know you were coming. I need to measure for furniture. She didn't even look up. Daniel and I are going to need new pieces for some of these rooms. Your couch is terribly outdated. I turned on the recorder in my pocket. You're already planning furniture placement? Of course. We take possession January 1st, so I need to have everything ordered by mid-December. She measured the width of the living room and wrote it down. We're thinking a sectional here, something modern, and we'll knock out this wall to open up the space to the kitchen. The whole downstairs layout is so closed off and old-fashioned. You're going to renovate. Extensively. This house hasn't been updated since the 80s. She moved to the fireplace. This will have to go. Gas fireplaces are so much more efficient. And the hardwood floors are nice, but we'll probably put in heated tile. She was describing ripping apart everything Thomas and I had built. Every choice we'd made. Every memory embedded in these walls. That sounds expensive, I managed to say. Oh, it will be. Probably $200,000 for the full renovation, but the house will be worth $1.2 million when we're done, so it's a good investment. She smiled at me. See, Margaret, this is why you could never maintain this place. You don't understand property values and investments. You never had to think about these things while Thomas was alive. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Rebecca measured for another 20 minutes, making notes about knocking out walls and updating bathrooms and replacing the kitchen cabinets. She talked about the house like it was already hers, like I'd already moved out, like my 43 years here had never happened. When she finally left, I sat on my outdated couch in my old-fashioned living room and listened to the recording. Then I called James Mitchell and sent him the audio file. She's establishing clear intent to permanently deprive you of your property, he said. She's planning renovations, she has a timeline, she's treating the house as her own. This is excellent evidence, Margaret. How are you holding up? I'm angry. Good. Use that anger, but stay calm in front of her. Let her keep talking. The more she says, the stronger our case becomes. On Monday of the third week, I met with Thomas's accountant, Harold Jang. Harold's office was in the same building as James Mitchell's, 2 floors down. He was younger than I expected, maybe 45, with glasses and a bow tie. Mrs. Harrison, I'm so glad you finally came to see me. I've been managing your accounts since Mr. Harrison passed, but I wasn't sure if you were reviewing the statements I've been sending. I wasn't. I didn't know they existed until 2 weeks ago. He looked surprised. Mr. Harrison didn't tell you about the accounts? He wanted to protect me. He didn't want me to worry. Well, Harold pulled up something on his computer. Let me show you what you don't need to worry about. This is your current financial position. The screen showed a spreadsheet with dozens of rows. Your total assets are currently valued at $12,891,847. That's up from $12,847,392 last week. The stock market had a good week. Your monthly expenses are approximately $3,200, which includes property taxes, utilities, insurance, and maintenance for your primary residence. Your rental income is $43,000 per month net. That means you're generating approximately $40,000 per month in positive cash flow, $40,000 per month profit. You could live on that income alone and never touch your principal, Harold continued. In fact, at your current spending rate, your wealth will continue to grow. You're spending $3,200 per month and earning $43,000. The difference is automatically reinvested. So when Rebecca says I can't afford my house, she's either lying or completely ignorant of your financial situation. Mrs. Harrison, you could buy 10 houses like yours and pay cash. You're one of my wealthiest clients. I let that sink in. One of his wealthiest clients. Harold, I need detailed financial statements for everything. Every account, every property, every investment. I need it printed and bound in a format that anyone can understand. For court? Possibly. Or for a family meeting. I want documentation that's irrefutable. I can have that ready by Friday. Will that work? Perfect. On Wednesday, Rebecca called again. Margaret, the movers are scheduled for December 15th. That's 9 days from now. Are you packed? I'm working on it. You need to work faster. I have the contractor coming December 17th to start the demolition. We can't have your junk in the way. Her voice sharpened. And Margaret? I spoke to a few assisted living facilities. I found one that has an opening, Sunset Gardens. It's $3,200 per month for a studio apartment. Can you afford that on your pension, or do you need Daniel to help you? $3,200. Exactly my monthly expenses. She probably called pretending to inquire for her own mother and got that figure. I think I can manage, I said carefully. Really? Because your pension is what, maybe $1,800 per month? Where will you get the other $1,400? She'd been researching, trying to figure out my finances, but she'd looked at my Social Security. She had no idea about the rental income, the investments, the accounts. I have some savings, I said. Oh, Margaret. Her voice dripped with pity. Don't lie to save face. We both know you have nothing. Thomas handled everything, and now he's gone. It's okay to accept help. That's what family is for. Family. This woman who was trying to steal my house, who wanted to demolish 43 years of memories, who thought I was too stupid to understand property values. She was calling herself family. Thank you for your concern, Rebecca. I'll be fine. If you say so, but when you run out of money in a few months, don't come crying to Daniel. We're not a bank. She hung up. I played the recording back 3 times, listening to her dismiss my financial competence, assume my poverty, position herself as the generous family member helping poor, stupid Margaret. Then I sent it to James Mitchell. His response was immediate. She just proved intent to exploit your perceived vulnerability. This is textbook elder financial abuse. We have her. By the first week of December, I had everything ready. James Mitchell had prepared a legal brief documenting every conversation, every threat, every assumption Rebecca had made. Harold Jang had bound financial statements showing my complete financial position, all $12.9 million of it. Linda Chen had compiled rental records proving consistent income of $43,000 per month. The evidence was overwhelming. On December 10th, Daniel finally called. "Mom, it's me." "Hello, Daniel." There was a long pause. "Rebecca says you're not packed yet. The movers come in 5 days. "I know when the movers come. Mom, you need to take this seriously. We have the contractor scheduled. We need the house empty." "We?" I asked softly. "Or Rebecca needs the house empty." Another pause. "It's the same thing, Mom. We're married. What's mine is hers." "And what's mine, Daniel? Is that hers too?" "The house should have been mine when Dad died. You know that." My heart broke a little. "Do I?" "Mom, you can't afford it. You never worked. You have no retirement except Social Security. It's not realistic for you to keep a house this size. Rebecca told you I never worked. You didn't. You were a housewife. And you believe that means I contributed nothing? That I deserve nothing? That's not what I'm saying." "That's exactly what you're saying, Daniel. Your wife has decided I'm worthless, and you're agreeing with her." "Mom, you're being dramatic. We're trying to help you. Sunset Gardens is a nice facility. You'll have friends there, activities. It's better than living alone in a house you can't maintain." I closed my eyes. He really believed it. Rebecca had convinced him that stealing from his own mother was actually helping me. "Daniel," I said quietly, "do you remember what your father said to you on his deathbed?" Silence. He said, "Take care of your mother. She's stronger than anyone knows, but she shouldn't have to be strong alone." "Do you remember that?" "Yes." His voice was small. "Is this taking care of me? Forcing me out of my home? Letting your wife insult everything I am?" "Mom, I'll see you on Christmas, Daniel. We'll talk then." I hung up. On December 15th, the movers arrived at my house. I opened the door to find 2 large men with a truck and Rebecca standing on my porch with a clipboard. "Margaret! Good, you're here. Gentlemen, you can start with the living room. Take everything except the couch. That's going to the dump." The movers looked at me uncertainly. "I'm sorry," I said pleasantly, "but I didn't hire any movers." Rebecca's face went red. "I hired them. We discussed this." "You hired them to move my things without my permission?" "Margaret, stop being difficult. It's December 15th. You need to be out." "Actually, Rebecca, I don't need to be anywhere. This is my house." "It's Daniel's house." "Is it?" I looked at the movers. "Gentlemen, I'm sorry you were called here under false pretenses. I won't be moving. You can bill this woman for the trip charge." "Margaret!" Rebecca's voice was shrill. "You can't do this. We have a contractor scheduled. We have plans." "Then you'll need to cancel them. Daniel will hear about this." "I'm sure he will." The movers left. Rebecca stood on my porch, shaking with rage. "You're going to regret this," she hissed. "I'm calling our lawyer. We'll have you evicted." "I welcome you to try. Merry Christmas, Rebecca." I closed the door in her face. Through the window, I watched her storm to her Mercedes and peel out of my driveway. Then I called James Mitchell. "She just tried to have movers remove my belongings without my consent," I said. "I have it on video from my doorbell camera." "Perfect," James said. "One more piece of evidence. Margaret, are you ready for Christmas dinner?" "I'm ready." "Good, because it's time to end this." I sent the invitations on December 18th. Not phone calls. Proper printed invitations on cream-colored cardstock that I ordered from the stationery store downtown. Each one said the same thing. "You are invited to Christmas dinner at the home of Margaret Rose Harrison, 847 Maple Street, December 25th, 6 p.m. Formal attire requested RSVP required I sent one to Daniel and Rebecca, one to Patricia and George." one to Thomas's brother Richard and his wife Susan, one to the Caldwells from across the street, one to Daniel's cousins, and one to James Mitchell with a handwritten note. Please bring all documents. Rebecca called within 2 hours of receiving hers. What is this, Margaret? You're hosting Christmas dinner? In the house you're supposed to have vacated? I never vacated, Rebecca, as you know. This is ridiculous. Daniel and I already made plans to host Christmas at our apartment. Then you'll need to cancel them. Christmas dinner is at my house, as it's been for 43 years. We're not coming. That's your choice, but I think you'll want to be there. Why would we want to? Because we're going to discuss the house, Rebecca. We're going to discuss ownership, finances, and future plans. I think you'll find it very interesting. There was a long silence. What are you playing at? I'm not playing at anything. I'm hosting Christmas dinner. RSVP by Friday, please. I need an accurate head count. I hung up before she could respond. Patricia came over that evening to help me plan the menu. You're really doing this, she said, looking at my dining room. I'd already started setting the table with Thomas's mother's china, the good stuff we only used for major holidays. I'm really doing this. And James Mitchell is coming? Your lawyer? He'll arrive at 6:30 after everyone's seated and had their first course. I want Rebecca comfortable, settled, before we begin. Patricia grinned. You're devious, Maggie. I never knew you had this in you. I learned from 43 years of watching Thomas handle difficult people. He always said the key was to stay calm, gather your facts, and strike only when you had an unbeatable position. And you have an unbeatable position? I have $12,891,847. I think that's fairly unbeatable. Patricia laughed. I'm bringing extra Tupperware. I want leftovers from this dinner to remember it forever. Christmas morning dawned clear and cold. I woke at 5:30 and lay in bed for a moment, looking at the ceiling of the bedroom I'd shared with Thomas for 43 years. The house was quiet around me, full of memories and love and history. Today I would fight for it. I got up and started cooking. Turkey with herb butter and sage from my garden, cornbread stuffing, mashed potatoes with real cream, green bean casserole, cranberry sauce from scratch, sweet potato pie, and pecan pie, the same one Rebecca had dismissed at Thanksgiving. At 4 o'clock, I went upstairs and put on the dress I'd bought specially for tonight. It was deep emerald green, elegant and expensive. I'd spent $800 on it at a boutique Patricia had recommended. I wore my pearl necklace, the one Thomas had given me on our 25th anniversary. Real pearls, worth $12,000, though Rebecca had once told me they looked fake. I did my makeup carefully, styled my gray hair, and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked like what I was, a wealthy 72-year-old woman who'd been underestimated for far too long. At 5:30, the doorbell rang. Patricia and George arrived first, then Richard and Susan, then the Caldwells. Everyone was dressed formally, and everyone knew something important was going to happen. I'd hinted as much when they'd RSVP'd. At 5:55, Daniel's car pulled into the driveway. I watched from the window as he and Rebecca got out. She was wearing a white designer dress that probably cost $2,000 in diamonds that definitely cost more than that. She looked like she was dressed for a gallery opening, not a family dinner. Daniel looked nervous. Good. I opened the door before they could ring the bell. Daniel, Rebecca, Merry Christmas. Mom, Daniel kissed my cheek. He looked at my dress, my pearls, my carefully styled hair, and something shifted in his face. Confusion, maybe, or the first hint that something wasn't what he expected. Rebecca barely glanced at me. She walked straight into the house, heading for the living room where everyone was gathered with drinks. Margaret's wearing Mikimoto pearls, I heard her whisper to Daniel as they passed. Do you think they're real? They must be. She stopped mid-sentence when she entered the living room, because there, hanging over the mantel where we usually hung stockings, was a large framed photograph of Thomas and me on our 40th wedding anniversary. In the photograph, we were dancing, and I was wearing these exact pearls. And beneath the photograph, on the mantel, was a small brass plaque that hadn't been there before. It read, Margaret Rose Harrison, owner, 847 Maple Street, 1981 to present. Rebecca stared at it. What is that? That's the property ownership plaque James Mitchell had made for me, I said calmly. Do you like it? I thought it was a nice touch. James Mitchell? Daniel looked confused. Who's James Mitchell? My attorney. He'll be joining us for dessert. Rebecca's face went pale. Your attorney? Yes, your father's attorney, actually. He handled Thomas's estate planning. I smiled at her. But we can discuss that after dinner. Please, everyone, take your seats. Dinner is ready. The dining room was perfect. I'd set the table for 11. The original guests plus James Mitchell's spot at the far end. Candles glowed in silver candlesticks. The china gleamed. The crystal glasses caught the light. I'd assigned seats carefully. Daniel and Rebecca were in the middle of one side, directly across from Patricia and George. I was at the head of the table where I'd always sat. Thomas's chair at the other end, where James would sit, was currently empty. We started with butternut squash soup. Conversation was awkward and stilted. Everyone except Daniel and Rebecca knew something was coming. Rebecca kept glancing at the empty chair. Is someone else joining us? My attorney, as I mentioned. He'll be here for dessert. Why is your attorney coming to Christmas dinner, Mom? Daniel asked. Because we have family business to discuss. Rebecca put down her soup spoon with a sharp clink. If this is about the house, oh, it's definitely about the house, Patricia said cheerfully. Among other things, Rebecca's eyes narrowed. Patricia, this is between Margaret and Daniel. It's not your concern. When someone tries to steal my sister's house, it becomes my concern. Steal? Rebecca's voice went shrill. We're not stealing anything. Daniel is entitled to— Let's save this discussion for dessert, I interrupted calmly. I'd like to enjoy the meal first. Richard, how is your grandson doing at college? We made it through the turkey, the stuffing, the side dishes. I served and cleared plates like nothing was unusual, like this was any normal Christmas dinner. But the tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. At 7:15, as I was clearing the dinner plates, the doorbell rang. That will be James, I said. Patricia, would you help me bring out the pies? I opened the door to find James Mitchell in a dark suit, carrying a leather briefcase. Mrs. Harrison, Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, James. Everyone's in the dining room. Are you ready? I've been ready since Thanksgiving. We walked into the dining room together. Every eye turned to us. Everyone, I said, this is James Mitchell, my attorney. James, you know most people here. Daniel, Rebecca, this is James Mitchell. He handled your father's estate planning. James shook hands around the table and took the seat at the far end, Thomas's chair. He set his briefcase on the floor beside him. Now then, I said, sitting back down at my place. Let's have dessert. I made pecan pie and sweet potato pie. Rebecca, I know you don't eat refined sugar, but I made the pecan pie anyway. It's tradition. I served the pie. Everyone took a piece except Rebecca, who sat with her arms crossed. Margaret, she said tightly, why is your attorney here? Because we're going to discuss the house. You wanted to discuss ownership and future plans, didn't you? That's between family. Everyone here is family except James, and he's here in a professional capacity. I took a bite of pie. Delicious. Patricia, you have to try this. Mom, Daniel's voice was strained. What's going on? I put down my fork and folded my hands on the table. Daniel, Rebecca has told you that I can't afford this house. Is that correct? Well, yes. You never worked, and Dad's pension stopped when he died. Yes, I nodded. And Rebecca told you that I have only my Social Security income. Right, about $1,800 a month. And based on that information, you both decided that I should move to Sunset Gardens Assisted Living Facility, which costs $3,200 per month, and that you should take possession of this house. Is that accurate? Rebecca leaned forward. That's not how we phrased it, but essentially— Yes, I interrupted. That's accurate. You both believed I'm a penniless 72-year-old woman who never worked and can't support herself. Silence. The problem, I continued calmly, is that every part of that belief is based on incomplete information. James Mitchell opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. Let's start with the house, I said. Rebecca, you've told several people that this house is worth $847,000. Where did you get that number? I had it appraised. You had my house appraised without my permission? She flushed. I drove by and estimated based on comparable sales in the neighborhood. I see. And based on that estimate, you assumed the house would be Daniel's inheritance upon my death? It should be his inheritance now. You can't maintain it. Let me show you something. I nodded to James, who slid a document across the table to me. I held it up so everyone could see. This is the property deed for 847 Maple Street, Riverside. It shows that Thomas William Harrison and Margaret Rose Harrison purchased this property in 1981 for $127,000. It shows that the mortgage was paid in full in December 1998. And it shows that upon Thomas's death in November 2023, the property passed solely to Margaret Rose Harrison. I looked at Rebecca. Me. I am the sole owner of this house. Not Daniel. Not you. Me. But Daniel is the heir. No. James Mitchell's voice was firm and professional. According to Mr. Harrison's will, which I drafted and which was filed with the probate court 14 months ago, this property remains with Mrs. Harrison for her lifetime. It only passes to Daniel upon her death, and only under specific conditions. What conditions? Daniel asked quietly. James pulled out another document. The condition is that you're not married to Rebecca at the time of your mother's death. If you are, the house goes into a trust for your children only, with your mother's sister Patricia as trustee. Rebecca can never claim ownership. The silence was deafening. Rebecca's face had gone from pale to red to white. That's not legal. It's completely legal, James said. Mr. Harrison had the right to dispose of his property as he saw fit, and he was very clear about protecting his wife from, and I quote from his instructions to me, any person who might try to exploit her perceived vulnerability. Perceived vulnerability? Rebecca's voice was shaking. She is vulnerable. She's an old woman with no money. Actually, I said quietly, that's the second misconception we need to address. I nodded to James again. He pulled out a thick bound document and slid it across to the middle of the table where everyone could see it. This, I said, is a complete accounting of my financial assets as of December 23, 2024. It was prepared by Harold Zhang, CPA, who has managed these assets since Thomas's death. I opened to the first page. Let's start with monthly income. Rebecca, you assumed I have only Social Security income of approximately $1,800 per month. Is that correct? She nodded mutely. In fact, my monthly income is $47,284. That's my Social Security plus rental income from properties I own. Properties? Daniel looked confused. What properties? I turned to the second page. These properties. I read them aloud, one by one. 17 rental properties, all purchased by Thomas over 20 years, all in my name alone, all generating consistent rental income. 1243 Oak Avenue, purchased March 2003. Current rental income $2,800 per month. 567 Pine Street. Purchased July 2006. Current rental income $2,200 per month. 891 Elmwood Drive. Purchased January 2008. Current rental income $3,100 per month. I read through all 17. By the time I finished, Rebecca was gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. 17 properties, I said. Total monthly rental income, after expenses, $43,284, plus Social Security, $2,000, plus investment dividends, approximately $2,000. Total monthly income, $47,284. That's impossible, Rebecca whispered. It's documented right here. You can see the rental agreements, the bank statements, the tax returns. It's all very real. I turned to the next section. Now let's discuss assets. Rebecca, you assumed I have no savings. You told Daniel I would run out of money in a few months trying to pay for assisted living. You don't have... I never worked outside the home, that's true. But my husband worked very hard, and he invested very wisely, and he put everything in my name. I started reading again. Checking account, Riverside First National Bank, $87,392. Savings account, Riverside First National Bank, $760,000. Money market account, Riverside First National Bank, $1,200,000. Investment account, Hartford Securities, $2,347,891. Retirement account, Hartford Securities, $1,847,293. Stock portfolio, various holdings, $1,103,847. Real estate holdings, 17 properties, $6,545,424. I looked up from the document. Total net worth as of December 23, 2024, $12,891,847. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. $12 million, Daniel's voice was barely a whisper. $12,891,847, I repeated clearly. Your father spent 40 years building this for me. Every property purchase, every investment, every dollar was carefully planned to ensure I would never need to depend on anyone. I looked directly at Rebecca. He knew someone might try to take advantage of me. He knew someone might assume a housewife has no value, no assets, no power. So he made sure I had all three. Rebecca was shaking. You lied. You let me think. I let you show me exactly who you are, I interrupted. You assumed I was worthless because I didn't have a job outside my home. You assumed I was stupid because I let my husband handle the finances. You assumed I was powerless because I'm 72 years old and widowed. I stood up, placing my hands flat on the table. And based on those assumptions, you tried to steal my house. You announced to my family that you were taking it. You scheduled movers without my permission. You hired contractors to demolish walls. You measured for furniture. You treated my home like it was already yours. We were trying to help you. Rebecca's voice was desperate now. Help me? I laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. You tried to force me into assisted living. You told me not to take my furniture. The furniture Thomas and I bought together over 43 years. You told people I was senile, that I couldn't manage my own life, that I was a burden. I pulled out my phone and pressed play on a recording. Rebecca's voice filled the room. You never worked. You never contributed financially to anything. You were just a housewife, and now that Thomas is gone, you need to be realistic about your situation. Another recording. When you run out of money in a few months, don't come crying to Daniel. We're not a bank. Another. You're an old woman with no money. You need to accept reality. I stopped the playback. This is called elder financial abuse, Rebecca. It's illegal in this state. James Mitchell stood. Mrs. Harrison has documented everything, every conversation, every threat, every assumption. She has recordings, witnesses, and a clear pattern of your attempting to exploit what you believed was her financial vulnerability. I want you to understand something, I said, my voice very quiet now. I could press charges. I could sue you for attempted fraud. I could make your life very, very difficult. Rebecca was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. But I'm not going to do that, I continued. Do you know why? She shook her head. Because you're my granddaughter's mother, and because some part of me hopes you're capable of learning from this. I sat back down. Here's what's going to happen. You and Daniel will leave this house tonight and never again discuss taking it. You will never again question my financial competence or my ability to live independently. You will apologize to every person in this room for your behavior at Thanksgiving. And if we don't? Rebecca's voice was defiant even through her tears. Then James files charges on Monday morning, and you'll discover what it's like to defend yourself against an opponent with $12 million and excellent legal representation. I looked at Daniel. My son, who'd said nothing through this entire revelation, who'd sat there learning that his father had millions he never mentioned, that his mother wasn't the helpless old woman he'd believed her to be. Daniel, I said softly, I'm disappointed in you. Not for marrying Rebecca. People marry the wrong person sometimes. But for believing her when she said I was worthless. For not calling me even once after Thanksgiving to ask if I was okay. For letting your wife bully your mother. Mom, I didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't ask. You assumed, just like she did. I stood again. I think it's time for you both to leave. Everyone else is welcome to stay for coffee, but Daniel and Rebecca, you need to go now. They stood. Rebecca was still crying. Daniel looked shell-shocked. At the door, Daniel turned back. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have... I know, I said. We'll talk later. But not tonight. Tonight, I want to enjoy Christmas with people who actually value me. I closed the door behind them. 6 months later, I woke on a warm June morning to sunlight streaming through my bedroom window. The house was quiet. My house. 847 Maple Street, owned by Margaret Rose Harrison, occupied by Margaret Rose Harrison, maintained by Margaret Rose Harrison's $47,284 monthly income. I made my coffee and took it out to the garden. The roses Thomas planted were in full bloom. The vegetable patch was thriving. Everything was exactly as it should be. Patricia's car pulled up at 9 o'clock. "Ready for book club?" she called as I walked to her car. "Ready." At book club, I was just Margaret, the widow who loved mystery novels and always brought excellent cookies. No one knew about the $12 million. No one needed to. Daniel had called me 3 times since Christmas. We'd had coffee once, awkward and painful, where he'd apologized and I'd accepted. We were rebuilding slowly. Emma had come to visit twice, without Rebecca, who I hadn't seen since Christmas night. I'd heard through Patricia that Daniel and Rebecca were in marriage counseling. I didn't know if they'd make it. That was their business. What I did know was that I'd saved my house, my dignity, and my independence. Some days I still missed Thomas terribly, but I could feel him in every corner of this house, in every decision he'd made to protect me, in the legacy he'd left that had allowed me to stand up for myself. That evening, I sat on my porch with a glass of wine and watched the sun set over my garden. I thought about everything I'd learned in these past months, that being underestimated could be a strategic advantage, that documentation was power, that age was wisdom, not weakness, that quiet victories were often the most satisfying. I thought about the look on Rebecca's face when she'd realized I wasn't the helpless old woman she'd imagined. The shock, the disbelief, the dawning horror that she'd revealed her cruelty to someone who had the power to destroy her and the grace to choose not to. I could have ruined her. I could have pressed charges, sued for damages, made her life a legal nightmare. But Thomas had taught me something important. The greatest victory isn't crushing your opponent. It's protecting what matters to you and walking away with your dignity intact. I'd done that. I'd protected my home, my future, and my granddaughter's inheritance from someone who'd tried to take it all based on the assumption that a 72-year-old housewife couldn't possibly be a multimillionaire. The irony still made me smile. Tomorrow, I'd have coffee with Patricia. Next week, I had a board meeting for the local library. They'd invited me to join as a director, and I'd accepted. Next month, I was taking Emma to the beach for a grandmother-granddaughter vacation. My life was full. My future was secure. My house was mine. And if anyone ever again assumed that a quiet, elderly woman who lets her husband handle the finances must be helpless and poor, well, they'd be making the same mistake Rebecca made, and I'd be ready. I raised my wine glass to the empty chair beside me, the chair where Thomas used to sit during our evening porch time. "Thank you," I whispered to the evening air, "for everything, for protecting me even after you were gone, for believing I was strong enough to use what you gave me." A breeze rustled the roses, and somewhere in my heart, I felt him smile. At 72 years old, I'd learned the most important lesson of all. Never underestimate a woman who's been loved well, who's been prepared thoroughly, and who's been pushed far enough to finally push back. The sun set golden over my garden, my house, my life. And it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.